Anthony Albanese is gearing up for his fourth meeting with President Xi Jinping and has just arrived in Beijing ahead of that meeting. About half an hour ago, he's received a red carpet treatment from officials there, as you would expect. The Prime Minister's trip comes, of course, amid intense scrutiny over how the government is handling the country's relationship with the United States. So let's bring in the Australian's foreign editor, Greg Sheridan. Greg, appreciate your time this evening. The PM gave a lengthy press conference in Shanghai today. I wanted to find out what stood out to you when you listened to him speak earlier today.
Well, James, I think this whole trip is a little ill-advised. There's no problem with going to China, but why would you go to China and not go to Japan and South Korea, nations with whom we have intimate political and security relationships and with whom we share values? We make a lot of money out of China, but is that the sum of the Australian soul? Albanese is in a position where he doesn't want to talk about harsh realities. He just has his few little cliches, you know, we agree where we can, disagree where we must, and so forth. He won't say anything significant about China. I think he got sort of a bit scared of the Americans, and so there was a little moment of itsy-bitsy dovish hawkishness just before he left. You know, Penny Wong discovered the Chinese military modernisation again, which he hasn't spoken about for a long time, and Albanese said he won't reverse his decision to get the Port of Darwin out of the hands of a Chinese-owned company, although why the government just doesn't do it. It talks about it, but it doesn't do it. I don't think we're getting anything of substance out of this trip, really, except the symbolism is all wrong. You know, China is still the predominant security threat in our region. It still takes a lot of actions against us all the time. It endangers our sailors and soldiers and airmen all the time. It's very aggressive in its regional posture, and it interferes in our politics as much as it can. So by all means, make money out of them, but I think you need to talk honestly to the Australian people about it. I mean, Albanese is not performing on national security. We've got this woeful defence budget, this joke of a defence budget. The Americans have clearly recognised that he's not performing, and at the same time he won't even talk honestly about the challenges that China provides.
So what I noticed, Greg, when I listened to him speak earlier today was he was incredibly passionate when talking about trade, but he started to get tetchy whenever he was asked about national security or the US alliance. Did he really think he could go to China with the US alliance in such a bad state and not be peppered with questions about it?
Well, that's a fair question, James. I must say, you know, I've never met Elbridge Colby, but the way he is driving Albanese mad while Albanese is in China wanting to hug pandas and be patted on the head and be called a handsome boy again is exquisite. It's beautiful. It's quite splendid, really. Now, Elbridge Colby is wrong, quite wrong, to say that Australia should commit to going to war with the United States against China if there's a war over Taiwan. The United States won't commit to that, so that's ridiculous. But everything else Elbridge Colby is saying about the alliance is true. Australia is not spending enough on defence. How would we plan to use the Virginia submarines? What is the nature of our commitment to the US alliance? How do we feel about all the bad things that China does? All the questions that Colby is asking are absolutely right. But Albanese, it seems to me, is a Prime Minister who really doesn't ever want to think about national security and doesn't ever want to talk about it. And the minute he gets asked a difficult question, he's in trouble. He can't go beyond his talking points. He just repeats in a kind of pre-artificial intelligence robotic way his few word processor cliche statements, and that's all he'll say. And then he gets annoyed that a journalist should ask him the question. You know, when the Chinese ambassador wrote a piece in the Australian press instructing Albanese not to respond to Donald Trump's request for greater defence spending, and indeed Albanese didn't respond to it. He took his instructions from the Chinese, no doubt independently, and a journalist asked Albanese about this, and Albanese wasn't annoyed with the ambassador, he was annoyed with the journalist for asking him the question. Well, I just think it's not sustainable, that ridiculous attitude, that sort of Chauncey Gardner, I like to watch kind of attitude to public affairs just doesn't work.
You mentioned, of course, that the US are publicly asking, in the event of conflict with China, whose side would we be on? You wrote in The Australian that this demonstrates just how badly the alliance has deteriorated, that the Americans are asking this publicly. Just talk me through that.
Well, it is an absurd question for the Americans to ask. The Americans themselves don't guarantee that they would go to war on behalf of Taiwan, and nor can they, because any guarantee like that, it's hypothetical. You don't know what the circumstances are. There's a 1 in 100 million chance that Taiwan attacks China or something. I mean, that's not going to happen, but if that happened, you're not obliged to go and defend Taiwan. So nobody gives that kind of commitment in advance. But a couple of years ago, the alliance was so intimate that the Americans could envisage selling us 3 to 5 Virginia-class submarines, knowing that we were the most intimate ally they had in the world and that we would always be with them. Because while we can't commit to going to war with them over Taiwan, in fact, if America is involved in a war in the Pacific, we're going to support them. I mean, we've got their bases on our soil. All our security is in their hands. We will support them. But of course, we can't say that in advance. But a few years ago, they didn't feel that they needed to ask that sort of question because the alliance with Australia was just so intimate. Now, Albanese, when he first got into government very narrowly, he spoke a good game on national security, and he sucked up to the Americans and he accepted AUKUS and all the rest of it. But now that he's won a big election victory, he's put a lot of distance between himself and Washington. He hasn't seen Trump. Trump's hard to manage, but Albanese is not managing him well. And he won't make a credible effort on defence. I mean, our defence budget is a joke. There's not a single defence person in the country who's not on Albanese's payroll who thinks that we're making anything like a realistic effort whatsoever. So now the Americans are saying, well, gosh, you're not the sort of ally you used to be. Well, can we really take Virginia-class submarines out of our order of battle and give them to you? And now Albanese can never commit to war in advance, but if he moved defence spending from 2% to 3% of GDP and spoke more honestly about China and supported the Americans a bit more on key issues where they are in the right, they'd be a lot more secure in the alliance. And this alliance has gone, well, formally since 1951, but really almost since 1908, when Alfred Deakin invited Teddy Roosevelt's Great Fleet to Australia. And it's in peril because of the weird combination of a left-wing Prime Minister in Australia and a capricious president in Washington.
Indeed, it certainly is. It'll be interesting to see what happens tomorrow after Albanese's meeting with Xi Jinping. Greg Sheridan, always a delight to talk. Thanks for your time this evening.